Required minimum distributions aren't the monster that you've been told to fear. The truth is, they're not the big bad wolf of retirement. They're simply rules to navigate, not a disaster waiting to strike. And yet, if you listen to most retirees or even many financial planners talk about RMDs, you think they're guaranteed to wreck your retirement. That fear is outdated. And today I'm going to show you why. I'm Stevenson. I'm a certified financial planner and wealth advisor. And over the years, I've reviewed hundreds of retirement plans. And I can tell you this, the data shows RMDs have quietly become far less threatening than most people realize. In this video, I'll break down for you the 4 major improvements in RMD rules, the situations where RMDs can actually become a problem for you, and finally, I'll teach you 3 strategies that you can use to handle them with confidence. Oh, and by the way, one of the most unique things that I'll explain today is how RMDs interacts with Social Security income in a much more favorable way. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. So part 1, we're going to talk about why RMDs have become more favorable than in 2017. When people talk about required minimum distributions or RMDs, the conversation almost always leans negative. They're framed as a looming threat that will tear through your retirement savings the moment you hit your early 70s. But if you take a closer look, the reality is very different. In fact, when you compare today's rules to where things stood back in 2017, retirees are actually in a much stronger position. The big bad wolf of RMDs actually has been declawed in several important ways. The first and most obvious improvement is that the starting age for RMDs has been pushed back. In 2017, retirees were forced to begin taking distributions at age 70 and a half. That meant you had relatively less flexibility than you do now. As soon as you hit your early 70s, the IRS stepped in and told you exactly how much you need to start pulling out. Fast forward to today in 2025, and things have shifted a bit in your favor. The age was bumped to 72 under the first Secure Act in 2019, then again to 73 under the Secure Act 2.0 in 2023. And starting in 2033, it will rise to age 75. So that's 4 to 5 year extension compared to the old rules. So why does this matter to you? Because the later your RMDs start, the less years you'll be forced to take them, meaning the more flexibility you'll have in your late 60s and early 70s for potential tax planning. So if most of your retirement savings is in a pre-tax 401k or IRA, stick around because in a few minutes, I'll talk you through 3 tax strategies on how you can handle that. The second big improvement is in the standard deduction. Back in 2017, a married couple filing jointly could shield about $20,800 worth of income once you factor in deduction and personal exemptions that you were able to take back then. Today, that number has more than doubled. In 2025, a married couple over the age of 65 will be able to shield close to $47,500 worth of income before paying a penny in federal tax. Think about that for a second. You can now have almost $50,000 of income without breaking into the first tax bracket. That's an enormous change. And it gives retirees a lot more space to absorb RMD income without feeling a big tax hit. So that's the important part there. Alongside the higher deduction, tax brackets themselves have become lower and wider. In 2017, a chunk of income that was taxed at 25% now falls into the 22% bracket. The old top tax rate was 39.6%, which has been reduced to 37%. And you don't reach it until you have a much higher income level as well. So the net effect is that today's brackets allow you to earn more before moving into the next tier. For retirees, this is especially powerful because it means that your RMD income, like I just said, is more likely to be taxed at lower to modest rates. Now, the 4th major improvement comes from updated IRS life expectancy tables, which set the percentages for each year's RMD. Under the older pre-2022 Uniform Life Table, at age 72, you were required to withdraw about 3.91%. Under the newer table, the percentage that you need to take is about 3.65%. So that's about 0.3% less than you would have back in 2017. Similarly, for age 75, the old table would have required a 4.37% distribution at age 75 for your RMD, whereas with the updated tables, you're looking at about 4.07%. Again, that's a 0.3% difference. And again, this is year over year, not just in 1 year. So these changes reduce the forced withdrawal amount at each age, like I was saying, helping you retain more flexibility and reduce the required taxable distributions that you had to make from your IRA or 401k accounts. So not only were the old rules relatively conservative already, but the new ones are even more so conservative. The IRS is essentially requiring you to take out less than what's generally considered a sustainable withdrawal rate. That translates into less forced taxation every year and just more control that you can have over your assets. Now, beyond those 4 headline improvements, there are also some indirect tax benefits that make today's environment friendlier than 2017. One important example is the way RMDs interact with Social Security taxation. I alluded to this in the introduction of this video, but the thresholds that determine when your Social Security benefits become taxable haven't changed since the 1980s, meaning they don't inflate for inflation. And on the surface, that sounds bad because those thresholds don't adjust for inflation over many, many years. But here's the overlooked good point about that. And that's because the standard deduction is now so much higher. The brackets are so much wider, like we just talked about. Retirees have effectively more room to absorb RMD income before crossing certain thresholds for Social Security, up to the maximum where 85% of your Social Security income is taxable. In practical terms, that means that RMDs are less likely to trigger extra Social Security taxes today than they would have back in 2017. Medicare premiums are another area where retirees have long worried about the effects of RMDs. If your income gets too high, you face IRMA surcharges, which are essentially penalties that increase how much you pay for Medicare Parts B and D. Now, this is a very real concern. I've done a lot of videos on it because it can add thousands of dollars per year to your health insurance costs. But here too, the environment has quietly improved actually, and not a lot of people are talking about this on YouTube. Unlike the Social Security thresholds, the IRMA thresholds are inflation adjusted, and they have steadily risen from 2017 through 2025. So that means that you now have more headroom before RMD income bumps you into a higher Medicare premium. Again, the wolf has weaker teeth than most people think when it comes to tax brackets. So when you put all this together, the story becomes kind of clear. Since 2017, RMDs start later, the standard deduction has dramatically increased, tax brackets are lower and wider, the required withdrawal percentages are smaller, and both Social Security taxation and Medicare surcharges are less likely to be triggered. None of these changes on their own may seem dramatic, but taken all together, they paint quite a different picture than most retirees have in their head. Instead of a looming monster that's ready to wreck your retirement, RMDs are now just another rule to manage, one that has become even more manageable than before. Now, the second part of this video, I want to touch on 4 main concerns, right? Where the wolf really actually shows its teeth and address those concerns. Even with today's improvements, retirees still worry about RMDs. That's just a fact. The 4 biggest concerns I hear are taxes going up, widowhood, being pushed into higher tax brackets, and accounts draining too fast. They're qualified accounts. So let's just quickly take a look at each of those. Like I said, the first concern is that taxes have nowhere to go but up. But history shows aggressive hikes are unlikely. The lowest tax rates set in 2017 have now been made permanent. The biggest risk is really shadow taxation, such as like inflation that we're experiencing right now, which can erode buying power more quietly than a dramatic rate increase. The second concern is widowhood. When one spouse passes away, the survivor files as a single taxpayer, which means lower and narrower tax brackets and potentially higher taxes. Their income usually drops as well, though, and so do many of their expenses. For most retirees, this results in a modest tax increase, but nothing that's financially destructive, as some might say. The third concern is getting pushed into a higher tax bracket once RMDs start, whether they stack on top of other income, such as your Social Security or pension income. In practice, like we talked about, today's wider brackets make this less likely and less of a major concern or issue. But I do understand that it is a concern that if your qualified accounts experience very high growth over several decades of compounding, this can become an issue. So like I said, we're going to discuss 3 strategies in a moment on how to handle this. But I always say that it's important to remember this is a good problem to have, right? You had significant growth in your qualified accounts. Now we just want to figure out how can you enjoy those dollars in the most tax efficient way. And finally, the fourth concern I hear is that RMDs may drain your accounts too quickly. But like we talked about, the updated life expectancy tables keep required withdrawals quite conservative, being under the classic 4% safe withdrawal rule that everyone talks about on YouTube, especially in the earlier and primarily in the earlier years of your RMD table. That means that the IRS is requiring less than what most planners already consider a safe withdrawal percentage. And even in the later years of retirement, when your RMD percentage is over 4 or even 5%, it doesn't mean you need to spend all that money, right? It just means that those dollars will be taxed. But who's to say that you can't shift them to your taxable account and invest them as if you were just investing other cash? This shift in investment bucket from your IRA to your taxable account might be the shift in mindset that you need to realize RMDs really aren't as bad as they might be made out to be. So while these 4 concerns sound scary, the reality is that each of these can at times be overstated, but they're definitely manageable with today's rules and with the strategies financial planners are able to use. Now, the third part of today's video, I want to talk about the 3 solutions that I keep alluding to. And really, this is about how can we tame the wolf that is RMDs as it comes closer to us. Because while RMDs aren't the big bad wolf, like I keep saying, there are smart ways to tame them if they do start creeping up on your retirement plan. And here are the 3 most effective. The first solution is earlier withdrawals. Instead of following the textbook sequence of withdrawals by utilizing taxable accounts first and then moving to pre-tax later, many retirees might be better served blending a mix of the two earlier on in retirement. By mixing modest withdrawals from both taxable and your pre-tax accounts in your 50s, 60s, and your early 70s, you naturally begin to reduce the size of your future RMDs. This approach also spreads your tax burden more evenly over time, instead of just letting it pile up later on in retirement. This can be especially powerful if you use tax-free funds like a Roth IRA or funds from your taxable accounts, positions that have a high cost basis, since the majority of your income would then be taxed at either the 0 or 10% federal tax brackets. It's kind of like feeding the wolf small bites early on so that it never gets too big to become dangerous later on in retirement. Now, the second solution is incremental Roth conversions. Too often, people think of Roth conversions as an all or nothing strategy, maybe moving hundreds of thousands of dollars in one go. But I always believe a better approach is smaller, more targeted conversions in years when your spending is lower or your income leaves you in favorable tax brackets. These micro conversions, as we like to call them, let you chip away at the pre-tax balances gradually without triggering massive tax bills or pushing yourself into a higher tax bracket. Done consistently, they give you more tax-free flexibility later on in retirement. And like we said, they contain your RMDs and keeping that wolf on a short leash. Now, the third solution is charitable giving strategies. Specifically, we're going to talk about qualified charitable distributions, or QCDs. Starting at age 70 and a half, you can donate directly from your IRA to a qualified charity. The withdrawal counts towards your RMD, but it never shows up as taxable income. And that's the beauty of it. It makes it one of the cleanest and most efficient ways to satisfy your RMD distributions if you're inclined to give. So instead of worrying about RMDs pushing you into a higher tax bracket, you can use QCDs to support the causes that you care about and you love while maintaining your lower tax bill. Personally, I love QCDs because it allows people to save money on taxes, which is a win. But more importantly, it allows them to experience and enjoy the impact of their fruits of their labor while they're still living versus when they pass away. So to me, that's what leads to a more fulfilling life. Together, these 3 strategies, blending withdrawals, making incremental conversions, and leveraging charitable giving, can really help manage your RMDs calmly and effectively. They turn a so-called threat into just another well-planned retirement strategy, which I love to see. At the end of the day, RMDs aren't the big bad wolf of retirement. The reality is quite clear. Today's tax code gives you bigger deductions, friendlier brackets, later starting ages, and smaller required withdrawals. With the right strategies, RMDs are just another tool or another rule to manage, not a monster to fear. Now, if you're in your 50s and starting to plan ahead for your retirement, make sure to check out this video here. Well, I'll show you how to diversify your savings beyond just pre-tax accounts so that you're in the strongest possible position before you hit your 60s and plan to retire. I hope you found today's video helpful, and I'm looking forward to seeing the next one.